Phil is opening Fight Pass. He hasn't watched a lick of footage. He just asked me, Justin who?
He's the guy from WSOF, right?
Yeah, it's PFL now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, he's that guy who barely beat Melvin Gillard.
Wow. Shameful.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Hello then, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connery, which with me as always is Will McKenzie. I have to go quickly, Phil, because we have a lot to get to on this week's episode. UFC 274, Justin Gaichy versus Charles Oliveira, and in fact those names should obviously be reversed. Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza, two title fights at the top of this card. Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson, because what really sets the tone for a title fight better than just a disgraceful bloodletting? and lots of other stuff too. We're going to see how much of this card we end up getting to. It may end up just being those top three fights, and then we touch on other stuff as a bonus episode. There's actually a bonus episode from last week I just realized I haven't released yet, but I think it was recapped, so it's not like it's lost its relevance, just no one cares anymore because everyone forgets about a card 2 weeks after it happened. So I'll try to get both of those to you this week. UFC 274, offcuts, plus I imagine our discussion of Rob Font versus Chito Vera will be a bonus episode as well. If it doesn't, it just occurred to me, Phil, it could also be segment 3 over Chandler Ferguson. We'll see. Anyway,
there are many options.
There are many options, and that's the point. That's why I'm moving so quickly, so efficiently through this introduction, as promised, to get to the main event, which is, as I said, once again, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaichy. Are you excited, Phil?
I am. I mean, it's another one of these ones where it's two of the greatest action fights of their era, and it's once again, as this seems to happen a lot at lightweight, and something that we've touched on more than once, we're back in coinflip town. Not spoiling anything about the picks here, but we said this like right back at the beginning of this sort of lightweight round robin they've got running. Everyone kind of seems to fight everyone else, and then sometimes people get a break from it when they get to go and beat up Tony Ferguson. But this just feels like another one where it's two people who are offensively completely devastating and defensively okay-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay-ish in different ways and not okay-ish in different ways.
Yeah. And I don't think like there's a real strong pick to be made for either man. I think that was our argument for Chandler Oliveira and Poirier Oliveira, and and basically all of those fights have pretty much looked like that. Mm-hmm. They've looked like coin flips. When I've come out of the other end of them, I was like, oh, Charles Oliveira is much tougher than I thought he was, but also he almost got killed in both those fights.
Yeah. He almost gets killed in virtually every fight.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly. What's the last great win Oliveira got over one of these like top flight fighters that didn't have moments of him just getting nearly pasted?
I mean, never, right?
Yeah. I mean, like Tony Ferguson, but I think by then we had already rightly surmised that he was no longer a great fighter. he still got beaten up a little bit by Nick Lentz, didn't he? There was a moment.
Nick Lentz is a significant step below.
I'm
He's
just
beaten
saying.
Lots of people who are obviously not equipped to hang with him.
Yeah.
I mean, like, even Kevin Lee, it was a kind of mad fight before Oliveira turned it around.
Yeah. Here's the last run. There's David Tamer, Nick Lentz, Jared Gordon, Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, and Dustin Poirier. Only, by my recollection, Jared Gordon, who got KO'd in a minute and a half, and Tony Ferguson, who is a shell of himself, as we will later discuss, didn't have a moment where they knocked Charles Oliveira on his ass. So yeah, coin flip territory is the Chucky Olives title reign in a nutshell. A coin flip in a nutshell, Phil. That's what we're looking at here.
I mean, even, so I think we had the same common pick that everyone did for, like, Gaichy Chandler, right? Which is that you kind of had it. You had to pick Gaichy.
Right.
Just due to where they were in their careers and the low kicks and all that other kind of stuff. But you had to say, like, Chandler might just wipe him out. And Chandler really almost did.
Yeah. And also made better adjustments than we expected. So it was even coin flippier, I think, than we suspected. Because it's not like Chandler didn't have any ideas after his typical amazing first round. So yeah, Chucky Olives, Justin Gaichy. Chucky Olives' toughness does seem like a good place to start because I have spent long enough questioning this man's durability, which means that if I end up picking him here, it will, of course, be the fight where he actually does get knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally. But you can't really question the toughness anymore. I think it's a combination of things. We talked about this when we discussed Aaron Pico week before, whenever that was. We talked about, you mentioned Charles Oliveira as a possible plan, right, for someone like Aaron Pico, which is you just accept that you're going to get hit and rocked and do it for long enough that you sort of get used to it. And I think with Charles Oliveira, I don't think that works for everyone, to be honest. I would like to see a guy like Aaron Pico develop his defense. For Charles Oliveira, I think the secret ingredient is that no one can finish him on the ground anymore. Like I guess Anthony Pettis did. If you're willing to go down there and just grapple super aggressively against him, you might have a shot after you hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to try and follow up with strikes after knocking him down, he's going to recover and probably get back to his feet and go right back to doing what he does. So I think that is a special ingredient, basically, that enables Oliveira to be as recoverable as he is while also being so hittable and hurtable. What happens if Justin Gaichy drops him? Because the thing is, before I accepted how tough and resilient Oliveira was, both mentally and physically, spent a long time underestimating those things. And before I came to this conclusion, I think I would have picked Justin Gaichy out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's probably going to drop him in the first round like everyone does. So how does he drop him? First of all, do you think that's going to happen? If so, how? And how does Charles Oliveira recover? Can Justin Gaichy actually convert that into a finish is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, it looks increasingly unlikely. But again, and all of this kind of stuff is just probabilistic. Like you said at the beginning, sometimes the shots that the people get dropped by and then kind of get back up from, sometimes they just finish them outright.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Gaethje is going to be less likely to follow Charles Oliveira down. I mean, so the question, one of the things about Oliveira's durability is, I think historically a lot of it has been mental.
Sure.
If you think of the times when he's been finished, he's never been knocked out clean.
Knocked down clean?
Knocked out clean.
Knocked out clean. No, yeah. No, I mean, that was always my question. It wasn't, can his chin recover? It was, does he just break when something bad happens?
Mm-hmm. So, you have to be, so primarily I think if Gaichy does hurt him, he will have to knock him down and follow him down, or he'll have to knock him out clean. And that's, again, something we haven't seen happen.
Yeah. Doesn't mean it couldn't. I mean, there are questionable ones. There's like, did Cub Swanson knock him out clean? I've always been a little suspicious of that one.
Yeah. I mean, huge punch to the body, massive overhand to the head. I mean, he looks incredibly upset when it's landing. But yeah, it's really difficult to say.
He's obviously hurt, but there's also something a little unnatural looking about the way he goes down and how he acts afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the desperate scramble of a body automatically trying to fight back that I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, he might have just been shut down by the body shot. It's very difficult to say.
That too.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think the other part of it is, like, how much is Justin Gaethje a Robbie Lawler type defensive grappler?
How do you mean?
Because, so, I mean, the main thing, so, you know, we talked about, like, the Firas Zahabi, like, 60-second guard before.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of strikers with essential, like, guards and ground games, which are even faster than that. I think John Jones talked about it, and he was very perceptively, with respect to Gustafsson.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he said, you know, he's really good at stopping takedowns and getting back to his feet. But if you get him down there for more than 10 seconds,
mm-hmm.
if you keep him down there, he's suddenly out of options.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of guys for whom this is the case. Like they're really aggressive at fighting. They're really good at fighting the initial shot. I mean, and it is often specifically, you know, the shot which they're prioritizing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think Robbie Lawler is the classic example. But deeper in the takedown series, and, you know, with more chain takedowns, and once they're actually down,
yeah,
you know, things start to go quite badly wrong. So yeah, Robbie Lawler is someone with an incredible sprawl. I think even back in his, you know, days before he sort of had that run to the title and he fought Rory Mack and all that kind of stuff, he had a great sprawl. That wasn't really the question. I think Gaethje is someone who scrambles very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
He has great instincts for getting his hips out of the way, or like recovering and getting back to his feet at all costs as quickly as possible. I do find myself, you know, how much you want to define how much you want to look at Khabib as being an anomaly or just being a good grappler. You have to kind of make that choice. But, you know, in the Khabib fight, that is what he looked like. He looked like someone who was incredibly, I mean, in that fight, perhaps over focused on stopping the initial shot, but who, once he was put deeper in grappling exchanges, suddenly ran out of ideas very, very quickly.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid point, and I suspect that you're right. I mean, honestly, I think that's a thing common to many, many MMA fighters.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, there's...
We even talked about this back before the first Peter Yan Aljamain Sterling fight, I think, when we were talking with Tommy Elliott, right?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, I think we were saying, you know, there's a serious chance that if Aljamain Sterling can get past the actual takedown defense of Peter Yan and get him beyond that scrambling stage, that Yan will give up positions for long periods of time. And then we forgot about that take.
Conveniently.
Or at least forgot to mention it again before the rematch.
I actually forgot about it. I'm not going to pretend like I had that in the back of my mind and just didn't mention it. Yeah, and I think that is a very good read on Justin Gaethje. I mean, Justin Gaethje, he is an incredible scrambler beyond the shot.
Hmm?
You know, I mean, what?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's not just a sprawl. It's like this 10, 15 seconds. I mean, the same thing was, you know, like, Gus as well.
Mm-hmm.
He was. I think that has gone. I think the scramble has gone out of his game.
The takedown that Chandler got on Gaichy in the third round of their fight. He got in, he shot in the double, locked his hands. Gaichy went airborne and just started Granby rolling midair.
Yep.
And it was such a dynamic adjustment of weight that Chandler ended up smashing his own head into the floor as he tried to complete the takedown, and then Gaichy immediately scrambled out the back door and got on top.
Yep.
So yeah, I think outside of even just stuffing the shot in that entire first momentary scramble, basically what you're saying is he's one of those fighters who's incredible on the ground until the position settles.
Yes.
Which is such a big thing about actual grappling dominance in MMA, is you have to secure positions. Guys like DC and whoever else like gets nitpicky about wrestling stuff. Maybe it was Paul Felder agreeing with him or whatever. They get upset about the way takedowns are tallied in MMA.
Mm-hmm.
But takedowns, in the same way they are in wrestling, are their own reward. Irrespective of how they're tallied, a takedown which becomes settled in absolutely has the same benefit as it does in wrestling. Which is, once the position is secured, that's a real takedown. That is the goal of the takedown. And that's why. So yeah, it's a huge question as this fight goes on, if Oliveira can just get past that first layer. And if he can, he'll probably be just as bad for Gaichy as Khabib was. That's my suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
He'll probably run out of ideas and just get his guard, if he even has one, just absolutely sliced through and get beaten up and or submitted. He's going to be given his back. He's absolutely, it's going to be a bad situation. He's still going to drop Chucky Olives on his ass at least once. It's bound to happen.
It seems almost impossible not to, right?
Yeah. He's absolutely going to do that. My question is, though, again, if he can't finish him, he's probably not going to fall into the ground. He might stand over him and kick his legs. I'll give Charles Oliveira some serious credit here. He's one of the best fighters in the sport in terms of seizing his moment and getting dynamically back to his feet. Without waiting for the person to back off, without waiting for the ref to step in, you throw a strike, and he has like a self-defense attitude. Oh, they threw the strike,
Yep.
Now they're catching their balance, quickly, get back up. And he'll shoot back to his feet, and usually that'll be followed by him going right back to what he likes to do, which is pressure. And I suspect that pressure, that attempt to pressure, will absolutely be what has gotten him into trouble early. Because I won't be shocked here if Gaichy starts in a little more of a counterpuncher mode, letting Oliveira walk onto his shots, because he's very good at that. They're both very good at that. Oliveira's great at walking onto shots. Gaichy's great at walking people onto his shots. But as the fight goes on, doesn't Charles Oliveira have a lot of weapons on the feet to trouble Justin Gaichy? A lot. First of all, He's got a jab. Michael Chandler had huge success with his jab. It's easy to forget, but because he had all these huge, massive right hands in the first round of their fight. But Michael Chandler really won that first round with his jab. Not the only one who's done that either. Gaichy is as you said, an okay-ish defensive fighter. He can read a lot of things. He's got a pretty stable high guard that he throws up whenever he's not sure what is coming. But as always, the jab is that little wedge that cracks open basic defenses like these and throws off timing and sets further things up. So, that's what you do. If somebody's shoulder rolling or slipping or ducking a lot, you open them up with the jab. You get those reactions out of them at the wrong times with the jab. And then after that, Charles Oliveira has great knees, a great uppercut, which Justin Gaichy also has, but this has got to be the first tall guy Justin Gaichy's fought whose uppercut is probably as good as his own. And he's got the clinch. He can draw out a badly timed duck, step in, collar tie, elbow. And that might be a tremendously effective way to go. It was kind of the major turning point in his fight with David Tamer.
Mm-hmm.
Got dropped early, refused to stop walking him down, took a few more shots, but just did that thing he does where he seems to take him better and better the longer the fight goes. Pushed him back into the fence, grabbed a clinch, huge elbow, and it was all downhill for Tamer for like a minute after that until the fight was finished. So I'm kind of leaning right now. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. I've been talking too much now, but I'm really kind of leaning in the Charles Oliveira getting dropped early and then just kind of having better variety to go with his pressure and breaking Gaichy down piece by piece the longer it goes.
Yeah. You know what? I think I might be with you. There's another thing that you didn't specifically mention that I think bears mentioning. Bodywork.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Oliveira, in the Dustin Poirier fight, it wasn't just the clinch, but like the front kicks to the body.
Mm-hmm.
He was constantly working the body, I think, in that fight. And I think one of the differences that we've seen in kind of late career Justin Gaethje that isn't necessarily a benefit for him is I think he has become more of a headhunter.
Yeah.
I mean, he was never a massive body puncher.
Well, he still has the low kicks. That is his huge,
he still has the low kicks.
Attritive weapon that has never gone away, and something we should also discuss here. But yeah, go
on. But when it comes to body work, I think I trust Oliveira to be like wearing on Gaethje more, and it's just it's something that's worked against him on several occasions. People just get him to put the high guard up and then just work him to the body. And I think either in terms of grabbing the clinch or in terms of front kicking him, or indeed like in terms of kind of doing both and stepping in behind the front kick into the clinch. There's the fact that I need to know how Gaethje reacts to someone that he knows is a serious grappling threat in a way which isn't as sort of panicked as he looked in the Khabib fight.
Yeah.
Because he looked desperate to not get taken down in that fight.
Yeah. I don't think Oliveira has just quite the same. It's close. He loves to pressure. He loves to just make the fight happen and never let up. But Khabib is insane with his pressure. When he knows he wants to pressure somebody, it's breakneck. It is like not a single moment to think or reset. It's not quite like that against Oliveira, especially because you get so many chances to hit him clean and at least put him on the back foot for a moment.
Yeah, I think Oliveira is that he is as insistent as Khabib. He's just slower.
It's slower and just not quite as durable.
Yeah,
because there are moments in that Khabib fight with Gaethje where there's one moment in particular, first round I think, where Khabib is pressing. Gaethje, absolutely, you're right, looks kind of tense and flailing. We've mentioned in the past, underrated, hilarious fight.
Oh yeah,
it is just
never gets old.
It's a real banana peel ass kind of performance from both guys, and yeah, Gaethje's one response, if somebody's in his face and just won't go away, he's going to fire off two nasty punches, and it's usually some kind of right hand, uppercut, overhand, straight hook, and then the left hook that closes the door. And it was right uppercut, left hook, both shots landed clean, hard. And Khabib didn't take a backward step, was clearly hit clean, and was just right back in his face. And I said this already a few times about Oliveira, that he'll get right back on you, but I mean right back in his face. Not a moment to breathe. It's not quite like that with Charles Oliveira. So, if Gaethje's one response to just relentless pressure is to hurt Oliveira, and he succeeds, possibly more than once, probably more than once, that does change it from the Khabib dynamic. And you're right, he's not as fast, although he does have reach, which makes up for that somewhat. So,
Yeah, other than that, I think there's the dynamic that I think the obvious thing is that I think in just basic physical durability, Gaichy just takes a shot better than Oliveira does.
Unquestionably.
I think that's got to be, honestly, his major advantage in this fight.
Yeah.
If they're going to be, and, he probably still hits harder.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure at a certain point how much that matters.
No, I don't think it matters as much. I mean, the basic equation is simply, I think one guy can probably take his opponent's shots and the other one can't.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it a coin flip. As you said, my kind of journey for this one has been, I think, pretty much the same as yours. Is that I find myself favoring Oliveira more, and the more I think about it, but then I'm just like, what if he just gets his face ripped off?
Yeah. What if Gaichy tears his face off and eats it in front of him?
Yeah, and Gaichy isn't like Chandler, where he's a single, explosive burst of power that kind of gets less explosive over time. If Gaichy is still there and not getting taken down and not getting put in the clinch, and his fight, I mean, Gaichy is more than capable of fighting in the clinch himself with, primarily with like the single collar tie and, hockey punches and so on.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pretty violent guy himself there. He's just going to be ahead on the durability equation. We saw, spoiler warning. We saw last week that just having a major durability edge can completely change a fight.
Yeah. This is not at all different as a dynamic from that, except for what seems to be a possible trump card in the ground game.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it actually is quite similar to something like Font Vera.
Yeah.
Right down to the one guy seems to over-rely on like a static high guard.
Yep.
But he just doesn't matter what slips through or how you exploit it. He can take it all. And yeah, Gaichy, I mean, he does slow down, but like his teammate Rose Namajunas, who we'll be talking about in the next segment, he seems to just catch his breath at the start of each and every round. He has multiple second wins in him. And he also his entire career has been exhausting himself brawling recklessly. So he's just used to it. He doesn't lose any courage whatsoever, any conviction when he slows down as Chandler often does.
I'm also kind of curious, like, has anyone really low kicked Oliveira?
That was that's why we need to talk about Gaethje's low kicks. They're a huge part of his game. I mean, he's the only dude Charles Oliveira steps in to grab a collar tie and just gets low kicked from that position. Like, he will throw them from anywhere at every time. It is a remarkably effective switch up off of the right hand. He's not a bad inside low kicker either, Justin Gaichy. It's just that huge chopping right low kick is the big weapon. But I'm kind of curious. Like, Oliveira has this Muay Thai stance. He certainly looks like he's ready to teep a lot. I think the biggest thing is you don't see him get low kicked a lot because he's usually just relentlessly pressuring people. So they can't get many kicks off. But it's hard to come up with an example of somebody who's just said, okay, maybe I'm going to get jabbed, but I'm going to trade that for a devastating low kick, and just accepted that gambit, and gone for it, which Gaichy will.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the start of the Jeremy Stevens fight, again, like an underratedly kind of funny fight with Charles Oliveira, Stevens low kicks him, and Oliveira just immediately charges in.
Right.
Just puts his foot down from getting low kicks and immediately just rushes into the clinch. And as it turns out, basically just gets taken down straight away by Jeremy Stevens and has to like spend several minutes fighting out of the guard underneath him. It's only when like Stevens disengages that Oliveira is able to get up. Yeah, I mean, Oliveira looks both low kickable, I don't think he's going to defend. I don't think he's going to defend low kicks any particularly, much more diligently than he defends. Let's be honest, almost anything else. But he's also just he's always going to be coming back with something.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing is why we haven't seen it tested that often. He just doesn't. You just don't get to set things up against Oliveira. But it is a question.
So yeah, he does. So I think having watched a bit more of the Stevens footage, he does kind of high walk to check as he's coming in, quite a bit.
Yeah, but his timing
I think he's probably pretty comfortable with dealing with low kicks. But as you said, Gaichy he's something else.
I mean, Gaichy will also, if you lift that leg up to check super high, as Chucky usually does, will just kick the other leg, just follow completely through and drop you. Yeah, I don't know. I've definitely seen, again, Oliveira has the stance of someone who checks well, but he has other defensive moves in his arsenal as well. I think it's a matter of like timing. I don't think Charles Oliveira, he's so offensively minded. I don't think he's particularly good at always at predicting what the opponent is going to come back with, because he's just utterly focused on how he's going to get to them and how he's going to hurt them and or take them down. So yeah, I'm going to pick Charles Oliveira. The low kicks do remain a seriously open question. And I'm also very curious about Gaethje's ability to stop the takedowns, because I think it just has to be absolute chaos for a takedown to succeed, which it probably will be. But even then, I don't necessarily see a gaping hole in Gaethje's takedown defense that I take one glance at it and I'm like, yeah, Oliveira is going to exploit that. But then I didn't really see that against Khabib either. So.
Yeah, I mean, also just Oliveira is just a tremendous MMA wrestler.
Yes.
And I think, amongst one of the things which has come back to haunt him occasionally, but I think that he's just one of those guys where he just has no fear that it's going to go wrong.
Yeah, and it might not
absolutely.
I'm sorry, but I was just saying it might not even have to be shots. Like, Oliveira is also very good at just taking rear waist cinches on people.
Oh yeah, I mean that's entirely how I expect him to get Gaethje down. If he does, he's going to be chaining things together. I mean, mostly he just runs. A lot of the time, he runs people into the clinch and then gets them down from there. But yeah he's got body locks, outside trips. He's got a really wide variety of takedowns, and he's very good at getting them. Like, run
you into the fence, I mean, this was one of take your back, broomstick your legs, all these kinds of things.
I mean, the Paul Felder fight.
Yeah.
Paul Felder is not a bad defensive wrestler at all. And Oliveira just ran in there and immediately took him down.
Yeah.
What's his face? Will Brooks. Went however many rounds with Michael Chandler. How many rounds did they actually fight in the end? It must have been at least like 8.
No, wasn't it
a hard guy?
Go on. I'm going to look that up.
A hard guy to take down, and one who was, able to kind of wear out Michael Chandler. Taken down immediately, instantaneously by Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
He is a very good MMA wrestler.
Yeah. Which is also, by the way, a very probable answer to the low kicks, which are the main thing I'm worried about actually preventing Oliveira from pulling ahead as the fight goes on. So if he can even catch one and get a clean takedown off of it, then that might just make it a non-issue.
And I don't think he's... I think one of the things about Gaethje is that, like, compared to someone like Paul Felder, I think Gaethje is more suited to be an elite lightweight, but like less well equipped to fight someone like Charles Oliveira. than Paul Felder was. Because as we said many times, Paul Felder is kind of a natural grappler.
Yeah. Again, Paul Felder is the one guy who's been able to get Oliveira down and just been happy and competent enough to stay there and actually beat him up. And that's the thing. Like, most of the time, I feel like what you need is a follow-up where you can just get on top of Oliveira and continue testing his chin.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why he's unbreakable. Pretty much no one else can do that. And I don't see that in Justin Gaethje's game at all. I don't even see a desire to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing. I think that Felder just went with his instincts, which were like, I'm essentially actually quite happy and comfortable top position grappling, and then Oliveira was suddenly like, oh no, I don't enjoy this at all.
Yeah.
But I think Oliveira has been, at least in his current run, constantly reassured that people do not want to go to the floor with him, with good reason.
Yeah.
And so he can always feel like he's the one dictating. And I think that's where a lot of his kind of mental strength is coming from.
Absolutely.
You know what? I'm going to pick Gaichy, not particularly because I think I have a great read on him winning. It's just that every time we've said, like, these are 50-50s, and then we've just had universal picks, I feel like just one of us needs to pick the other one this time. That's just how lightweight is going at the moment.
Okay.
It's always looked... Someone has to represent just the chance that Gaethje just clubs Oliveira and it just hurts him super badly.
I think what's happening here, Phil, I think you're pretending to be very diplomatic and you're doing it for the fans, and all that's obviously bullshit. Because what's obviously happening here is you've picked up on a pattern, which is each time I underrate a guy until he's proven me dead wrong, and I'm like, all right, I guess he's good, and then I pick him, he loses. That's happened.
Yeah, in exactly the way that serves to prove the narrative false. Yeah, precisely.
You're just looking for that sweet moment of being right and getting to laugh at me, and I don't care. You know, I'm picking Charles Oliveira. It took me long enough.
Break like a brittle twig.
Yes.
He's gonna get punched and then low kicked 2 times, and then he's going to just tap to strikes.
He's gonna fall apart punches. Like 5 feet 10 inches of toffee, just utterly just crumble. Yeah, I don't care. I like him. I assume he can survive, and if he can, I think he's got the right answers to not get broken down, and in fact to do the opposite to Justin Gaethje. Body shots, forward pressure, clinch strikes, wide variety of takedowns and positional advancements that don't even require full takedowns straight out of the clinch. Uppercuts, knees, various ways to exploit the high guard, and a jab. I think that this is more than enough reason for me to pick Oliveira here.
I think he is the smart pick. And to be honest, I think a lot of these fights have sort of gone the way of the smart pick. Mm-hmm. It's often been icy, but, I think in the end, I think the ground game was such a difference with Poirier that we were simply kind of wrong to pick him against Oliveira, as close as that came. I think Chandler Chandler in both his fights with Oliveira and Gaethje, I think it's just the sheer attritional damage of someone who's been fighting for that long. Admittedly, fought it incredibly smart and incredibly courageously in a way that you couldn't predict.
Yep.
But they still look like 50-50s. I think Oliveira is once again the smart pick. I think I'm just going to pick Gaethje just because I feel like at some point the smart pick isn't going to work anymore.
It's not a smart sport.
Yeah, sometimes just like someone's just going to get punched in the face and fall over.
Well, this will be a comfortable position for me then, Phil, as being the guy who knows he's smart. Everyone says he's smart, but is just wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just constantly wrong. That'd be great. I know exactly how to settle into that sort of vibe. That is my pocket. All right.
It's the pocket for a lot of us on MMA Twitter, I feel.
Yeah. Smarter than a lot of people, not nearly as smart as we think, and usually wrong. Yeah, it's a great place to be. All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, the other title fight, Rose Namajunas, Carla Esparza 2, a rematch my God, 2014, 8 years in the making, 7.5 years in the making. this will be the ultimate test, Phil, of our rematches just mostly just go like the first fight, no matter how much time has passed. It'll be the ultimate test of that theory. We'll talk about that and more after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We asked the question before the break there, does this conform to our sort of soft rule that rematches just sort of remain predictive no matter how much time has passed between fights? That all these dreams of people growing and changing are really, as we've also discussed last week when we talked about Aaron Pico, really people just sort of paper things over. People don't usually solve the core problems in their game so much as they kind of address them. They solve little things around them, but it's very difficult to change. And so our sort of rule is that rematches, again, the first fight will remain a predictive fight for a very long time. And this seems, Phil, like the ultimate test of that. Because 7.5 years, more or less, have passed between Rose Namajunas' first title shot, the first strawweight title fight in the UFC, in which she had all kinds of success against Carla Esparza until Esparza started taking her down and just beat her ass and outgrappled her easily. 7.5 years later, Carla Esparza, arguably still in the tail end of her prime, but much older, seems prone to gassing halfway through every 3-round fight she has. Rose Namajunas, like Charles Oliveira, it seems much harder to break than she used to be, much more difficult to create a single bad moment and have that be a turning point in a fight than it once was. Much more consistent. She's not going to gas and start freaking out really early the way she did against Carla Esparza. At least she shouldn't. All these things seem to have changed. And because of that, I was ready for this to be like the headline rule, where I pose the question, is our rule going to hold here? And then we start segment 2 and I'm like, no, the rule doesn't hold. Rose is going to win. I'm not actually that sure though. That's the thing.
I mean, that's the thing, is that there's rarely that many examples where there aren't that many like counter examples. Can you think of many fights where someone just clearly lost a fight to someone early in their MMA career and then just turned it around later on? Because we mentioned, the things that really fueled this kind of
GSP Hughes
discussion
is one that comes to mind.
Yeah, but I mean that's a fight where like Hughes was whooping his ass. I mean, sorry, GSP was whooping his ass and then like did something stupid.
True.
At the end of the fight, you were just like, oh yeah, GSP.
The dynamic didn't really change.
GSP is 100% going to be champion soon.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think there's like Blachowicz Manua is a counterexample. Mm-hmm. I mean, often the thing is that often there is, as there sort of is here, there's an age discrepancy thing happening.
Right. You have to wait for your rival's body to collapse, and then you can win the rematch.
Yeah, much like Shogun Hua is doing to OSP.
His greatest rival, OSP.
I'll get you for that skateboard if it's the last thing I do. What was the other counter? So, like Oliveira, Jim Miller, for example. Let's take that as an example. Like,
okay.
That's an example where in the first fight between the two of them, one of those guys was super raw, and in the second fight between them, one of them was super shot, or at least quite shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways from this is that, like, maybe many of the elements that people think of as being like Rose Namajunas, what makes Rose Namajunas a good fighter, simply did not exist when she fought Carla Esparza.
Yeah.
I mean, like, she looks so bad in that fight. I mean, that's in relation to who she is now. But this was before Rose Namajunas developed her jab. Before she was known as a boxer or a power puncher in any way.
Yeah.
She was basically just seen as a sort of incoherent arm bar, like power submission and head kicks fighter.
Yeah.
Because that's what she was, and that's what she looks like in that fight.
She was like AJ McKee, like dynamic submission grappling mess on the feet who could nonetheless, make people uncomfortable with just sheer dynamism. It is interesting to look back at those early performances and realize that a lot of those things are still in Rose's game. They've just been fleshed out with so many fundamentals, but she does still like to throw like crazy jumping double kicks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
She's never gotten over the impulse to throw those techniques.
I mean, that's how she beat Weili Zhang. Like,
sure.
It's not a bad idea to have crazy stuff in the back pocket.
But she also arguably lost to Weili Zhang in much the same way that Esparza beat her 7.5 years ago.
Well, sort of.
Sort of. It's not a great parallel, and she was able to turn around grappling positions. I don't think Weili Zhang is as good of an actual grappler as Carla Esparza, who is just phenomenally good on the ground. But she did just kind of out-wrestle Rose a lot through almost actually through every round. I think she, even later in the fight, it was Weili getting a lot of the takedowns and Rose just squirming her way out and getting on top.
Yep.
So, again, how much have things changed is a very open question. She's added so much, but are the core weaknesses kind of the same?
I think this has serious potential to be the funniest example of this thing. I mean, like, I am like one of the Rose defenders.
Sure. Because you hate communism.
I mean, still, it would be hilarious. Like, Blachowicz Teixeira was in its own way kind of funny because there was all this kind of.
Sure.
I mean, Blachowicz is one of the few people who, as we said, has had a rematch with someone whilst they're both in their prime and has literally just made it look way, way better.
Yeah.
But then, we were like, he's developed so much. He's not going to just be like the guy who lost to Patrick Cummins, who just, threw a bunch of strikes and then got super tired and panicked. And then you're like, nope, he is. He's going to do that. He's going to do that completely, 100%.
And that goes to show, even when you do think the problem's been solved, because, again, we had, like, Manoa Blachowicz, and it's like, oh, my God, look how much better he's gotten.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it was just Manoa just hitting the wall?
Yeah.
And just not having it anymore the way he did in the first fight. The first fight, by the way, in which he blew out his knee. Yeah. And had to just clinch Blachowicz in one of the most dreadful light heavyweight fights of all time. But the point stands is like, as you said before, oftentimes it's just that the person gets old. So those are the two things we have to grapple with here.
Mm-hmm.
How old has Carla Esparza gotten? And how much of the many wonderful things that Rose Namajunas has added to her game and the wonderful experience she's gained, how much has that actually informed her ability to not just lose a fight where somebody can take her down and to actually, like, sort of ferociously outgrapple her in a way that Weili Zhang really couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I think that really works against the idea of being able to pick Esparza, as funny as it would be, is how little she's been able to make that work. I mean, so you mentioned before, I think before you started recording, Esparza hasn't lost very many clean fights in the UFC. It's basically Suarez and Gaichy.
She has 6 losses in her career, and 3 of them, all to very good fighters. Very good. Like, we're talking greatest of all time, and then one of the best waylaid prospects this division has ever seen in Tatiana Suarez. Those are the three that are clear. People who finished her, basically. And then otherwise, every other loss, all three other losses were split decisions that she very arguably won.
Yep. The flip side of it is that she hasn't won that many convincing decisions either.
It's, as you said, a perpetual tough out, not always a convincing winner.
And these are not necessarily against the biggest fighters. I mean, not actually some of them are huge, but not necessarily against the most physical fighters or the best takedown defenders. And she's still not really effectively controlling them enough to win clear decisions. So she got a majority decision against Grasso. She got a split against Watson, a split against Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
She lost a split against Randa Marcos back in the day.
And Claudia Gadelha, I really thought she won that one, but that was another split.
Yep, I thought she won that one too.
Yeah.
And these are all, notably 3-rounders where she's fading.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in general, it just feels like too much stuff is piling up behind Rose Namajunas. So I think Namajunas is going to panic herself into getting... She got submitted in their first fight, didn't she?
Yes. She got rear naked choked, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Do I think Namajunas is going to panic herself into getting RNC'd again? No, although it would, again, be pretty funny.
Be very funny.
Just to have someone, develop in all these incredible ways over the course of their career and just become, one of the biggest punchers in the division and have this ironclad focus on fundamentals and but also retain the dynamism and then just lose to the same tiny underwhelming wrestler that she
frantic little dwarf.
Yeah.
Just runs in and takes her down and submits her. That would be very funny, Phil. That's the temptation. It would be very funny. I may end up picking it our picks are utterly meaningless. Just to everyone understand that. I may end up picking it just because it's so funny.
Oh yeah. I can fully stand behind it. I mean, again, I think there is an obvious smart pick is that Namajunas has proven better at fighting round to round. She can actually box and it's extremely hard. She's way bigger than Esparza.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you just can't trust Esparza to A, win rounds completely convincingly from the top, and B, to be able to do it for 3 rounds, let alone 5.
Yeah, she's sort of a Gleason Tebow without even the natural excuse of having cut 35 pounds to make weight. It's sort of
her
inexplicable.
natural excuse is at exactly the opposite end of the spectrum, is that she's a large atom weight.
I guess you're right, that she just gets exhausted having to grapple with women who are almost certainly all stronger than her.
Mm-hmm. I think that's basically it.
Just tenacity and technique just has to cut through their positions and cut through their takedown defense and everything, and take their shots. I like Carla Esparza, man.
Yeah.
She's just a grimy fighter. All the fights are close, but they're never bad. This is the thing. I don't know. We were talking about this before. People seem to have this held over resentment for Esparza because of, I guess, she was an ass on The Ultimate Fighter, which is a show that people watch. Apparently.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's a show that they used to watch 8 years ago. I don't know if anyone does now.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, okay. So again, on the Rose's side of the scales, the striking is so much better that even if you take any indication from the limited success she did have early against Esparza, if you assume that instead of doing a bunch of crazy inefficient stuff and just wasting all of her energy, she just immediately starts snapping Carla Esparza's little bobblehead back with jabs and starts running her into body shots and just hitting her with left hooks and right hands clean on the chin, if that just speeds the process of Esparza gassing, if not hurting her to the point where she can finish her. It's not like Esparza can't be finished. She's relatively easy to hit clean. Her striking, it can be kind of nice at moments, especially when it's playing off of her wrestling. But even then is often very messy. And when her wrestling isn't working, is just like disgustingly bad. It can be really, really sloppy. She's also a little like Wilson Hayes in that way, where everything has to be clicking or nothing seems to be clicking. So if you think that Rose is just going to be hurting her and keeping her at bay and making it very difficult to get in a position to get clean shots, so she's going to have to absorb damage to do it. And then you add to that Rose neither gasses permanently in fights anymore, nor loses willpower to the point that she can just be shut out of the fight. And then you add to that the fact that Carla Esparza gasses. I have one more question to ask, which is she going to gas grappling with Rose?
Why would you say that she wouldn't? Because she's been gassing out a lot.
She has. The other thing with Rose, though, which is why it took me so long to, even though I have also always I like both these women, in fact. I'm not quite as concerned as Rose about the red tide, but, I still.
But only not quite.
Not quite. Obviously I'm concerned, but, I really like both of their fighting styles. I have enjoyed so many fights from both of them over the courses of their long and storied careers. But one of the main reasons that kept me hesitant in the same way I have been with Oliveira, about Rose for so long was this idea that she's not strong. So when more physical fighters tie up with her, that used to be the reason that she would, I think, start to break and gas, is that people would tie up with her, and like Esparza, it would just exhaust her.
She's just a willowy fighter.
Yeah. Is she strong enough to have that effect, if that is the reason for Esparza gassing? Can she make her gas? Because her strategy against Weili Zhang was kind of like Derek Lewis-esque. Like, she was kind of pretty inactive on the ground until the last 2 rounds of that fight, when she started to fight hard to get out. It's almost as if she preserved her ability to win the grappling late by just kind of accepting that she was losing the grappling early. I mean, remember, it was for all the wrestling that happened, it was a pretty slow-paced fight. Quite slow-paced. Yeah. And maybe those two things are connected in one way or another.
Yeah, that's more than fair, I think. Would you describe, like, Michelle Waterson as a strong...
Absolutely. A titan. No.
That's the thing, it's just, like...
No, I wouldn't.
The problem is with Esparza is that it's hard to find what's the ceiling at which what's the point at which you can just beat people easily? It seems relatively hard to find. And to be fair, her last fight, Yan Xiaonan, was extremely dominant.
Yeah.
About as good as you could hope for, really.
Yan is not a great athlete.
No. But, she's at least reasonably big.
Mm-hmm.
And Esparza TKO'd her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the thing. There's a small possibility that she doesn't need the whole fight. Like, she is going to be, I think, if she gets Rose down, the best grappler Rose has faced since their first fight by a pretty good margin.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So maybe that just brings back all of Rose's older problems too. That it's just like there's often a PTSD sort of element to these kinds of fights.
Oh yeah, like I think if you look at Blachowicz, like he against Teixeira, he suddenly just starts panicking.
Yeah, especially when it's the exact same person doing it, though. Oh God, it's happening again, is the feeling.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if I was picking this with my head and not the part of my head that wants funny things to happen, I would say that I think Rose can just play it safe on the ground. If she already proved she could do that against Wei Li and probably survive, no matter how great Esparza is, she can probably still just tie her down in some like stalematey positions, if need be. And wait for Esparza to slow down. And in the meantime, she will be encouraging that process by landing clean and devastating shots on Esparza. But I'm going to pick Carla because it's really funny if she wins.
Yeah.
It's like one of the funniest things ever if she wins. Like you said. Now, when you said before it, one of the funniest, and I was like, I don't know. I was thinking, what? Women's MMA fights? Title fights? Because we just had Penne Nunes. But in terms of funniest rematch PTSD performances, this would be top of the heap.
I mean, especially, like, consider, like, yeah, the fact that Rose was the incredibly hyped prospect coming in.
Yep.
As we've said many times, the dynamic of Tufts is that there's a cool, exciting fighter and a grinder. Yeah. And they go through their different side of the brackets, and everyone's like, wow, cool, exciting fighter's going to win, and then the grinder does.
Yes.
But more than that, you know, she was super hyped up. She's gotten through all these, like, incredible rivalries and pretty much has come out on top of all of them. Yeah. Whether it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk or Jessica Andrade or
Zhang Weili.
Weili Zhang. And at the end, if it's just the tiny, underwhelming wrestler who just won split decisions all the time and gradually clawed her back to way back to a title shot that they put as the main event on a card because they just needed to stack it with title fights so they could say there was more than one.
I mean,
it would be absolutely hilarious.
The only thing funnier would be if that happens. And then she gets a comeback fight against Karolina Kowalkiewicz and somehow loses that too. And I say this again, having quite a lot of affection for Rose, but that would also be just tops. Yeah. Again, I do not think that is an impossibility.
No, I think it's much more like, because yeah, having looked back at some of the Rodriguez fight,
yeah.
Esparza controlled a lot more of that fight than I remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Rodriguez has... I mean, the thing is, Rodriguez's success on the feet was... Rodriguez's success on the feet was so strong that, you know, she just went insane, that was enough to, like, get her I think, one judge's card. But yeah, she was on her back a lot, and Esparza was very relentless with the takedowns. I was slightly thinking like maybe Esparza is Calvilloing it a bit in that she's spending too much time on the feet, but I think no, that is not true. And you know, Rodriguez actually is not the world's greatest takedown defender, but still fought off Mackenzie Dern when Dern was trying to, you know, admittedly Dern has horrific takedown entries, but
horrific takedowns. There was the Alexa Grasso fight too. I mean, Esparza kind of dominated Grasso on the floor until she gassed. Grasso did her thing, went wild in round 3, and Esparza just looked horrible, was just getting hit horribly clean. But even in that round, she's so gutsy. She got a takedown and still got like a minute and a half on top, just like trading stupid guard punches with Alexa Grasso.
Yep.
So again, I will add to my pick that for the percentage of that pick that is actually real, I think this could happen. I will say, Esparza either needs to reawaken the part of Rose Namajunas that has zero confidence, which is not impossible, but seems less likely than before by a good margin, or she needs a finish. Because she could have all the success she wants for 3 rounds, and if Rose is still there and can still catch a 4th and 5th wind at the start of the championship rounds, she's going to finish Carla on the feet. She's going to knock her out.
Yep.
But I think it could be
because she is a ferocious finisher, and yes. Unfortunately for Esparza, she is also in her current form. I think this is one of the major dynamics maybe we haven't touched on. It's obviously just how much of a quick starter Namajunas is most of the time. And
True.
even just that kind of first few kind of that very early feeling out stage before Esparza shoots for the first takedown, I think Namajunas there's a solid chance that Namajunas can just hurt her quite badly as she did Weili Zhang.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, I do think that A, it's very funny, and B, it does need to be reflected. Like, so again, it's similar to the Gaichy Oliveira pick. I just feel like someone just has to pick the chance of just like random bonk happening.
I'll follow
Someone
my
should also
sword
pick-
this time.
Someone should also pick just the chance that maybe Esparza can just get enough takedowns to make it work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've got to pick Namajunas. It's just there's too much piled up on her side. She's she's younger. She was really not a very good fighter the first time they fought, and she's a very good one now. And she has a big, a youth and size advantage, which is always helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will. I'll happily fall on my large comedy sword, which is of course fashioned in the shape of a half-peeled banana. Pierced through my
even
corpse.
more phallic than
Will be sticking out my back when the police arrive 3 weeks after this event to find me. It's going to be really, really funny if I end up being wrong on both these picks somehow, because this one seems likely, but if you're right for the first one on your absolute coin flip bullshit, I'm going to be so mad. Let's take a break.
Let's go, Justin, just for that.
Just for that.
Just to make Connor mad.
I do deserve it, Justin. So if that gives you any extra motivation, I have it coming. Let's take one more break. When we come back, either Chandler Ferguson or which sounds like a whole different MMA fighter, Chandler Ferguson. Either him or Font Vera. I haven't yet decided. That's after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We've decided, fuck this Chandler Ferguson guy. He's got a stupid name. He sounds like a stupid person. We're going to talk about Robert Font and Marlon Vera instead. Phil, I think this is this was a classic Heavy Hands breakdown. Did we more or less hit upon every factor that played a role in the fight? Yeah, kind of. Did we get it right? Absolutely not. Who are you kidding? No, of course not. It was the Aldo fight. The Font's Aldo fight, to be specific. Just worse.
Yeah. And I feel like you need to apologize. You need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the pick.
Oh.
For your fandom of Chito Vera. Perhaps one of the greatest cheaters the bantamweight division has ever seen. Oh, I like Chito Vera. He's so athletically ungifted.
Mm-hmm. He's got
a man with
the iron jaw.
Yeah, a skull of adamantium and a body of made out of leather. What was that, Connor? What was this like? Oh, he's just a regular old. He's just a regular old non-athlete who's just trying to win with guts and determination. I think what we've seen from Chito Vera is the ascendancy of MMA's true athlete cheater face. It's appropriately enough, he is now Chito Vera.
Seems quite fitting that he started sporting the sort of villainous Count of Monte Cristo goatee.
Yeah.
For this new phase of his career.
We've seen, we've seen the other phases of athleticism kind of fall by the wayside. Crappy old Cody Garbrandt tried his best, and he was like, I'm super fast, and I was so quick, and I can see things happening, and I've got massive power in my hands. It was useless. It was useless, Cody Garbrandt. None of that was good.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the back of the line, and then Rob Font was like, oh yeah, I've got huge long arms and giant hands, and I try really hard, and I'm also pretty durable. No, Rob Font, no. It's not it. Just need to be able to completely ignore damage. Just completely ignore it like it doesn't exist.
All these fighters sound suspiciously like you when you're not putting on your podcasting voice.
That's just my general complaint.
I don't know about this one.
Don't tell them about that.
Oh, I like Tekken.
I've got an image to maintain.
Oh, I'm quite a fan of Tekken Tag, aren't I?
That's you, Phil.
Anyway.
Uh-huh.
Cheeto Vera.
Cheeto Vera.
Cheeto Vera. Yeah. Just a giant bitch who's trying to ruin the sport with his Cheetah physicality. Just like what's his face did against Brandon Moreno did against poor Davison Figueiredo.
We sort of made a single faceted comparison last week between Cheeto and Yoel Romero. Who knew? Who knew how valid that comparison really was? This was a Yoel Romero-ass fight.
I mean, it really was.
Really? 100%. Yeah. Just singular tactical moments that create vast, crushing moments of success. And an ability to somehow take vast amounts of damage without showing any effects, never wobbling, never staggering, basically just no-selling everything that lands, and also not even showing a mark on his face. That's almost the most shocking thing.
I know.
He got hit with, let me just pull the numbers up, 271 strikes, landing 159 of his own, by the way. I know everyone's already talked about the huge disparity, and this fight is a prime example of how damage is clearly more important than volume, because no one's questioning Cheeto won this fight. Why would you?
I think some people actually are.
Well,
they're obviously totally insane.
Honestly, I'm concerned for those people. I'm not being patronizing. I would like to meet these people and talk to them and see if I can get them to some form of counseling. But 271 strikes. Rob Font is not pillow-fisted either. He's a perfectly adequate puncher. He's a pretty big puncher.
He's more than a perfectly adequate puncher. People would say, like, this guy is one of bantamweight's power punchers before this.
Yeah, he's a pretty big puncher. And, he didn't even, raise a mouse or cause an abrasion on Cheeto Vera's leathery face. Yeah. Astounding. Okay, so let's, is that really just the main factor? I think it is a huge one.
It's the main, because Vera fought a fight that was, worked incredibly well, which was also one which was contextualized around, it had to be contextualized around the fact that he could only fight that fight with infinite durability. It's like, is Yoel Romero a good game planner or an idiot who can just spend durability?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem to matter to him. Like, neither of these things really matter because if you've got the durability to pull it off.
And the tactical ability, that has to be said too. That was also the Yoel Romero thing is.
Yeah.
You can go in with an awful game plan, which sort of just supposes from the start that you're going to just drop 4 or 5 minute chunks of the fight to your opponent and then just win rounds with singular moments of offense. Those two things seem like the big factors. I'm kind of interested to talk here, cause I think we are more or less in perfect agreement on that dynamic that, Rob Font landed way more. He was able in certain ways to exploit Cheeto Vera's defensive tendencies or lack thereof. And, he had the high guard. I will say he actually he kind of made it work pretty well, despite taking so many shots. He did also, block a lot of shots. In terms of strikes thrown, he was the slightly more accurate fighter of the two. Though they both landed more than 50% of their attempts. That's MMA for you. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is Rob Font. What does this mean from going forward? But also specific to this fight, and maybe this reflects on the Aldo one as well, since this was just that one turned up. What can he do differently in these fights? What is the path forward for Rob Font's development, or is there one? Or is he just bound to lose to a guy who is just durable enough to take all of his obviously meaningless punches and knock him down once a round in 3 or 4 rounds?
I mean, I think the only thing he can do is go up a weight class.
Oh no, you've got MMA fighter brain, Phil.
He used to go. I mean, he can go down a weight class. That'd also be funny if he could do that.
No, don't do it, Rob.
Go and fight. No, I mean, he just doesn't. Okay, so I mean, basically, the shots that Chito landed that hurt Font were clean shots, but also every elite fighter gets hit with clean shots like that. Every elite fighter, including...
Aside from the knee, which would have knocked out a lot of fighters, they weren't all like, oh, that's obviously a knockout punch kind of blows.
No.
There were 2 weird hook kicks that hurt him. I don't even think both landed with the heel. He just didn't see them. And then there was a sort of leaping left hook as he was running along the fence that put him on rubber legs. And then there was a short flying knee right to the orbital. That one really fucked him up. But you're right. They weren't obviously massive punches. Although I have said for a long time, Phil, that Chito Vera is, I think, a much harder striker than you might guess.
Oh, yeah.
He's a very snappy, quick striker.
If you just, I mean, mechanically, if you look at how he threw and landed those punches, he has turned into just a big puncher.
Whole body behind them, very efficient, right to the target, very little time to react, which is just as important as landing with power, as we've seen all the times the fighter goes down in weight and gets dropped by faster guys, or all the time someone goes up in weight and suddenly starts knocking people out when they didn't in the smaller class. That speed, the ability to get to the target that quickly, is also important, and Chito absolutely had that. He looked like the faster man throughout this fight.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
he did. I think he only really did after the first knockdown. That was when he was, I think, more comfortable to plant and throw with.
Sure.
With Font. I mean, like this was. I mean, it was such a weird fight. The first 2 rounds, like, Chito barely landed a punch until that. And it was all just like, the dynamic of the fight was all just like, well, Font is absolutely chewing him up, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. And maybe Chito's leg kicks will work at some point.
Yeah.
That was the essential, like, way it was working until he ate that hook, like in the closing seconds of round 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, Chito was able to punch with him. But until then, seriously, he'd landed like maybe 3 meaningful punches, and then other than that, had just been sort of clawing for the clinch.
And landing low kicks.
Yeah. I mean, low kicks, sure. But that seemed to be the dynamic, is he was willing to trade like 5 punches for a low kick. And you're like, maybe that will work?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be hurting him at all. Yeah, I mean, it was just super strange. But yeah, I don't think Font can do anything moving forward unless I think his durability is just too badly hurt. Like it's gone at some point, which just leads me to think that, like, bantamweight, as well as being, the best division and the division of being of huge punches, it's also the division where people just disintegrate super fast.
Sure. I mean, those things are probably all related.
I mean, Renan Barão fell off instantaneously. Cody Garbrandt fell off instantaneously. Marlon Moraes was on, an incredible tear and basically was sort of retired by Rob Font and then later by...
And then
several other people.
Retired 8 more times.
Yeah, but the difference between, Rob Font is the guy on the ascent, and then suddenly, like, Rob Font looks like he's not going to win any more elite fights at all.
Which begs the question, how good is Dominic Cruz?
I mean, I was going to say, like, for people who have actually managed to retain, it's very impressive for people to maintain in this division, I think.
Cruz, Dillashaw, I mean, Jesus.
Cruz, Dillashaw, and Aldo.
Yeah, oh my God. Well, obviously Aldo. The fact that seeing what happens, I mean, in that context, seeing what happens to people in this division, as if it needed any more weight, just adds yet more weight to the idea that Jose Aldo is the best fighter of all time. I used to be a GSP guy.
I'm willing to co-sign, yeah.
It's Aldo. I doubt I'm going to be changing my mind about that until I see someone put together a resume like that and have a post-prime that incredible and somehow be on the cusp of a title shot like 5 years after the crushing loss that probably would have just broken any other champion who had gotten that used to reigning. Now, okay, so I'm with you on the durability. It's probably a problem. I don't think it would be the worst idea in the world for Font to go up, although I will add, I think also a problem in this matchup, as we guessed, was that he was facing a bigger guy who could just reach him, and that's why he got surprised so often. Because even Cheeto's jabs were hurting him at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was just he was tense in that range and totally focused on offense, and normally he can do that. And he's just, his corner's yelling at him, be first. Don't wait on him. Put the jab out there. Put several punches together. Just keep touching him. That works when the other guy's too far away to touch you. But if he just eats the 2 punches and hits you with one really clean shot and you're not expecting it, you're going to get hurt. So that will be a problem. Going up in weight is just a higher probability of finding some Cheeto Veras. Although there are also a lot of weird short little tanks at featherweight. But imagine Rob Font going up and having to fight like Brian Ortega. Or Chan Sung Jung.
I mean, Chan Sung Jung would be old enough by that point that Rob Font would probably just knock him out.
Maybe. I'm not sold on that. Jung's a big fighter. Who also has a not nearly as like welded into his process as Rob Font's jab, but has a quick ramrod jab like Cheeto's. You might just hit him with one clean shot and suddenly hurt him when Rob Font thinks he's winning. It could be the same kind of fight over again.
Yeah, but I think but this is the thing, is that he's not able to take big shots. And no one in MMA can afford that. No one.
Well, he sort of is able to take them. The thing is, Rob Font has shown now incredible recoverability. For a guy we used to suspect might be just sort of barely hiding an inherent breakability, you can't break him. Like maybe the last round of this fight when his entire face had changed shape and I'm sure you could barely see or breathe. He was not the same fighter. He probably should not have been sent out for that round, although he gave it his best effort every damn round.
That was still one of his. That was like the only round I think there's a case for him winning after the first.
Yeah.
I think.
The thing is
doing the better work for a lot of it.
Can Rob Font get by suffering those kinds of huge moments if, say, he's like 30% more diligent about hitting the body? Is that a change?
He hit the body so much for an MMA fighter, though.
He hit the body a decent amount. Early on, too.
So much for an MMA fighter.
Early on, too. And it kind of faded out as the fight went on. That is the kind of tactic you have to stay on super consistent. Let's see if I can look at some stats or if I'm just totally wrong here. 14.
No, I think you're right.
14 body shots in the first round. 9 in round 2, 12 in round 3, then 5, then 8.
Okay, so I mean, but that's not bad. And by MMA fighters standards.
But guy's a meaningful puncher. Guy's got the reach. Great at working off the jab. Should be thrown to the body a lot. 73% of his strikes, according to UFC stats, were to the head. There's no reason to do that, especially not against Cheeto. You're not going to knock him out.
Cheeto showed no reaction to body shots either.
Yeah, but he's gonna show a reaction to them more than he did to the head if you throw 50% of your strikes to the body. Got better shot of hurting him there. He doesn't have Yoel Romero's like carved out of granite torso.
Maybe he does.
Well,
he's just immortal to all forms of.
We know he's got an incredible chin. I mean, even after last week when we were like, oh, he is more durable, people in the comments rightly pointed out several instances of Chito Vera just being literally impossible to hurt, and Rob Font having been hurt in numerous fights. They pointed out that Rafael Sunsao dropped him, that John Lineker hurt him more than he hurt Chito, though he didn't drop Rob Font somehow, because Rob Font went like fully defensive. And Pedro Munoz dropped him before submitting him. Chito Vera is unbreakable. You hit the body of a guy like that. I'm sorry. You hit the body constantly. And that's how you get yourself into the fight. Wouldn't have been a bad idea against Jose Aldo either. Hit the body all the time. Use that jab to set up body shots. I'm just saying, that's one way of continuing to bank on your ability to get hurt and somehow recover and go back to being aggressive and getting back in the driver's seat and doing it so successfully as he did in both of these fights. If the opponent is having less and less success instead of the same success at like the 4-minute mark of every single goddamn round, you can win these fights. You got to break them down. And then the other thing, I just would love to see Rob Font just clean up a lot of other little elements of his boxing. I liked the uppercut as a read. I did not like the way he threw it. Very ugly uppercut. There was no Calvin Kattar uppercut. There was no Justin Gaichy uppercut. You're not supposed to drop your hand to your knee and come scooping way up from underneath. You pull the elbow back, you fire it up and out. And Rob Font needs defense, which he also doesn't have.
Yep.
Really at all. He gets himself out of position when he punches. He's super counterable after that. There were like a couple instances here where he would like slip a jab and come back with the uppercut, and I was like so excited to see it, but he just can't do any of that consistently. He is an offense.
He's basically got one defensive reaction where he slips his head and puts his right hand up.
Yep. Covered slip to the right. The head movement that literally everyone can do.
Yeah.
And not particularly well timed, and very rarely, not nearly often enough anyway, leading to any counter offense. That would be.
Chito did show a lot more defensively than Font did.
That's what I'm saying.
That's because that was what he was trying to do all the time.
Sure, he was doing Yoel.
Like most. Yeah. He was just putting his hands up and seeing what was coming at him.
Yeah. So these are some changes. Obviously, at a certain point, making those technical improvements is often way harder than a simple thing like, oh, let's change divisions and see what happens. But I don't see any good reason that going up to 145 is going to instantly start netting Rob Font wins.
Oh, no, I mean, I just think Rob Font is doomed at this point.
That may be right.
I just don't think anyone has the defense to survive, particularly at these divisions, without a good chin.
Yeah, Sriram compared him to Michael Bisping, which I thought was a very strong comparison.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Michael Bisping had this fight. He had this fight with Wanderlei Silva, where he just boxed him up for every round, and then at the end of every round, Wanderlei Silva would just go nuts and land one thing on him.
And Michael Bisping had a late career resurgence, largely a late career run. Largely, I think, fed by latent technical...
old people in a bad division, yes.
Well, hey, you were talking about the rematch-itis thing. Bisping Rockhold is a great example of one where the guy didn't get old.
Mm-hmm.
And Bisping just won it because he'd gotten better and he did the right things.
Yeah.
So there is at least...
because Rockhold's chin had gone.
Wow.
So
had gone
Rob
or...
Font, hang around, wait until Chito's chin gets as bad as yours is. Take your revenge.
All I'm saying is, what Rob Font needs to do is now make best friends with Chito and ask him for Jason Perillo's number. Because it worked for Michael Bisping. And he's going to need a serious tune-up if he's going to continue to succeed at all, because he's in a much tougher division than Bisping's 185, even at the time of Rockhold.
Yeah, I mean, my main thing after this was, I mean, I said it after the Aldo fight, but it really is that the Aldo fight looked so desperately unfair for Rob Font if you weren't really rooting for Aldo, because he was doing all the right things.
Yep.
And then suddenly it was just slipping away from him in these key moments. And once again, this is a fight where he's doing basically everything you would want. I mean, he's going to the body more than you would, more than you can ask an MMA fighter to be honest.
Well, not if you're me, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, how many MMA fighters have gone to the body as consistently as Rob Font did? Maybe Holloway.
It's why that plus jab plus head movement. All my usual canards.
He did so. He kept Cheeto behind the high guard as much as he could, with just slapping shots before he could set up the big stuff.
Yeah.
And he didn't break mentally. He got up after we said, maybe Cheeto would just surge back into this fight, but we don't think that will happen to Rob Font anymore. It didn't. Cheeto didn't surge into the fight. Rob Font got back after every hideous knockdown and just fought his ass off, just like he did, just like he had been the round before.
Yeah.
Just none of it mattered.
Yeah.
Because he would just get hit clean and that would be it. That would be it for the round, and he would have lost the round, and Cheeto would just look completely unmarked and unfazed. It was one of the most unfair-looking fights I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I am looking, by the way. It's still not as much as I would like. It never is. But in his fight with Jose Aldo, according to UFC stats, 25% of his landed strikes were to the body. Very healthy margin by MMA fighter standards.
Mm-hmm.
To your point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that you can ask all these things of MMA fighters. He did almost all the things we would ask. He made sure he was first, he controlled the cage, he pushed Ferrer back for the vast majority of it. If you gave MMA fighters a list of things to do that we like to see, he used the jab, all this other kind of stuff, he would get an absolute A+. And then he couldn't take the shots at the end of the round. That was it.
Yep.
It would just take his eye off the ball. I mean, it was like Rivera Yarn, but just way worse.
Yeah. Yep. Well, who knows? Technical improvements. I have to say these things. I don't know if they will ever happen. They rarely do. Rarely do. Changing division seems more likely, but again, I don't really see that working out either. It seems like a rough path forward for Rob Font. I just have to say it because I would be so delighted if we see Rob Font in his next fight, and it's man, he had a good process now, but now all the particulars are tight in a way that they weren't before. Because it's not just about process, You can get by with just process if you have some sort of just overpowering physical attribute, like Cheeto's chin, If Rob Font had Cheeto's chin, this game would be working like money. He would have won this fight. He would have beaten Jose Aldo. But if you're limited by some physical factor, as Rob seems to be by his durability, then you need to really, really focus in my opinion, on the tiny little details of polishing every single element of your technical game. So that you're not just, if each error is really going to cost you, you have to make as few errors as possible. You have to have that great process, but you have to do it as flawlessly as you can. You can't just be leaving openings chasing a game that beats people who can't just eat whatever you throw at them and give back stuff that you can't eat. So, we'll see. You can do it, Rob. Jason Perillo, the other guy, Trevor Whitman.
Yes.
Somebody who's really, really good at fine-tuning boxing technique, maybe even like a Henry Hooft, maybe someone I've never heard of.
Just a boxing coach, like a really good boxing coach.
Just hook up with a really good boxing coach. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to even be an MMA fighter. The game is already so boxing centric. He needs to just tighten up all of the specific details of his boxing, and he could make this process that already is working so well that it feels unfair when he loses, actually win these fights. That's my opinion. I don't know that it will happen, but fingers crossed. All right, that's it for this week's episode. Way over time, but you guys don't seem to mind that. You're sick, perverted, MMA-obsessed weirdos who seem to like it if we talk for like an hour and a half. And let's be honest, 3 very interesting fights, so I'm glad we spent the time on them that we did. Check out our Patreon. I have a bonus episode from last week, which I just realized when we started that I hadn't released yet, in which I believe we discussed Luque Muhammad undercard stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so.
No, we didn't. That undercard sucked. Did we talk about that stuff? I think we talked about... Did we talk about Lemos Andrade stuff? We did. Yeah. We talked about Charles Rodin.
Yes.
We talked about
I mean,
Claudio
we basically
Puelles.
went through that card, yeah.
Okay.
You spent a frighteningly long time talking about Macy Barber and Montana De La Rosa.
I think Macy Barber...
Anyone...
I think that was on the main episode. Which
okay.
some people were miffed about, but, you know, fuck you. Go to the Patreon if you want to hear the other stuff. That's what you get. You got to give me $3 precious if you want to hear the fights you're actually interested in. And only then a week and a half later, we're going to throw that up on the Patreon in addition to a little discussion we had about Tyson Fury and legacy versus, you know, making the good decision and retiring. And in addition to that, we're going to cover, I think, a couple things from the UFC 274 undercard. So it'll be a big, meaty bonus episode, or possibly 2 bonus episodes. You can listen to that and all our other bonus stuff for $3 a month. Make sure you check us out on Twitter. Phil's at Evil Greg Jackson. I'm at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H. That is, should I say the URL, by the way? It's patreon.com/heavyhands, I'm pretty sure. And that's it. If you guys came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.